Alright, hi guys. So today I'm going to be talking about the MVC architecture, models, views, and controllers. Before I even start that though, I would like to just do a quick review on the request response cycle. So very quickly put, the client or user does a request of some sort, so you could be clicking on something or you can be inputting a file or inputting user information. Either way, it's going to be typically it's going to be a get or post request that gets sent to the back to the server over here, and it pulls the data that you requested. If you requested data, it does the logic that it needs, and it's going to spit it out back to the web page or the web app. And either A, it's going to have the information you requested, or B, it's going to give you some kind of error typically. So well, why even MVC? So very quickly, it's a way to organize code. It's easy to marginalize code and easy for development. Well, why? Well, you organize the code in a way that makes it easier for anyone to come in and kind of look at the code and understand what's going on. If I'm working on a project with someone and they're all the way in, let's say, another part of the country, and they're trying to understand what the code is, an MVC model or architecture will give them a way to kind of understand what's happening in the flow of the code. Especially as you scale and your apps become bigger, this becomes more and more important. Um, and also another big advantage is that other frameworks use a similar or the same architecture. I believe Java uses the same architecture in MVC, and then also, as an example, one that uses similar is Python. They use an MTV, which is models, templates, and views. Just to give you guys a better idea, I'm going to show you kind of an analogy about starting a company. So when I first start a company, especially in this whole startup world we have going on now, it could be anywhere from 3 to 4 people in a startup. Well, when you start that up, everyone kind of has overlapping responsibilities. I may be a developer and also part of the hiring team, and my other partner may be a developer and also part of the finance team. But such a small company, you have so many different roles within the company. And imagine if we all came in at first and we wanted to make a company a certain way, but it was all different ideas. Um, yeah, with 3, 4 people, it's not a problem because you guys could probably, you know, come to a conclusion which you guys think is best. What happens if you add 5 more people? Now all of a sudden, there's just 5 more people and there's 5 more responsibilities. Um, are they all developers? Are they, um, what's their role within the company? So that's what happens with companies as they expand. People become part of departments. Um, and just imagine if you were trying to get reimbursement for a trip and you didn't know where to look. This is what it would feel like. You would feel like Homer, like, who do I contact? Who do I even speak to? You can be running in circles just trying to find the right answer. And like I said, you create departments. So for Homer's case, if he wanted to get his reimbursement on his travel, most likely he would not go to production or IT. He would go to finance or HR. Um, as it scales up, it makes it much easier to know where you're going, who to talk to. In a small scale, you might be able to put all the code together on one page, but it makes it very difficult if other people come in to look at your code. Um, as a example that you guys may understand a little bit more at the moment is your HTML, CSS pages. Uh, you can write all of the styles onto your HTML page if you'd like to, but we've decided not to, and we moved it to another file. It makes it easier to fix any bugs or find any bugs for that matter. But yeah, definitely makes it much easier, and that's the reason we separate it into different departments. It's the same thing with MVC, why we separate it into different parts of the project. So I'm talking about how great MVC is and the fact that it makes it easy for you and everything. The truth is there's also some disadvantages. One of the big disadvantages is there's a lot of overhead running frameworks. Um, so that means it uses a lot of computing power just to kind of run these apps. Another thing is when I say security bugs that you will not have control of, meaning a lot of things are written for you already, so you don't see it. Just as an example, when you create a Ruby project and you have a HTML page there, there's actually a style sheet already linked to it. You don't see the link like you would if you were doing a CSS page. It's there, it's written within the framework. That's something that would be a disadvantage if you didn't understand that. So there's a lot of things happening under the hood, especially when it comes to frameworks, and sometimes you have to dive a little bit deeper, dig a little bit more, just to kind of find out exactly what's going on. Um, just like if you were using other people's methods or functions, you don't always understand what's going on under the hood unless you actually can find out where it is. So, all this talk about how it's great to kind of marginalize your code and move everything. So what is MVC? Well, first the M is models, and it handles your database, handles your data. Um, I'll get into a little bit more in depth about that when I actually go through and just kind of walk through a project with you guys. The views is the HTML rendering, so think of what you see, what you actually can see with your own eyes on the page. That's what the views are. And then the controllers is where the logic is done. So remember in the HTML or in the request response cycle, when it responds back, it can respond either with the data that you were looking for, or it's going to give you an error. That's what your controllers would handle. It would handle, well, if it's correct, then it'll send you this data, but if it's not, it'll send you the error message. And then last but not least, I have to tell you about routes or else you won't understand the example. The routes handles where the request will go. So think of like if you type in a URL, it's that request. So the get or post request is what the route handles, where to go within the controller. So I'll go over this again one more time, but it's pretty much exactly what you see here. So the view, it writes something, it goes to the controller, it goes to the models, and it comes back. But they all kind of work in a cycle together. So let's go over a quick project and see what's up. Oops, supposed to be logged out of that. So the first thing is going to be the models. So when you want to go look at the models, there's a couple different things you're going to look at. So the first thing is the schema. This is kind of what kind of information can be passed through to the models. You have the first name, the string, last name string, email string. I won't get into password digest quite yet, but it's essentially saying there's a password required. This is one of those things where I was talking about where it's a disadvantage. Unless you've kind of looked into it, you wouldn't be able to really understand what's going on here. But so this corresponds directly to our models. So if you open up the app, go to models and then user RB, you'll see here this is the models. This is where you're going to do your validations. This is another one of those disadvantages where you don't know what's going on under the hood. It has a secure password. That'll be for another video. But in this case, whenever a user is trying to be created, it needs to validate that it has a first name, last name, and a presence. Presence meaning that it's there. And the same thing with email. Don't worry too much about this part of it. That's for actually validating, making sure that the email is written in an email format. So that is the models part of it. So the views. The views is this right here. It's what you see. This is what you're looking at right here. So this is this form right here. This form has an action, a post action of register. I'll explain how that goes in a second. But it needs a first name, a last name, an email, and a password. Well, how do we know that? Because in the models, it's there. And so now if I create a user, I click register, it's going to go to my routes. So this is where I said you kind of have to know a little bit about routes, but it's about where it's going, right? So when it goes to routes, it's going to route me to, well, it's looking for a post method called register. If you go to routes, here's your post method called register. Oh, nice. So the views is talking to kind of a middleware type deal to tell the request where to go. So the request is going to go to our sessions controller and then to our register method. So now if we go to our controllers, it's going to go to the sessions controller, and this is the sessions controller right here. And remember I told you the controller it does all the logic? Well, what it's saying here is it wants to create a user. I won't go through over every little thing on this right now, but essentially what this is a call to create a user. Well, it's asking if this user right here is valid, then it will redirect to this page. But how does it know what the user params are? I've went ahead and created it down here just to make it a little simpler for myself. It's a private method. That's for another lecture. But the params that it's going to need is first name, last name, email, password, and password confirm. This information is taken from the request that was made by register. Just so you guys see it, first name, last name, email, password, and password confirmation. Just so you guys can see where it's coming from. And what it's saying is if that is valid, so those are all valid from the model, it will redirect to this page. Or else it's going to render an error page. So for example, let's say I don't put anything in here. Let's see what happens. So these are the errors that happened. It said the password can't be blank, first name can't be blank, last name can't be blank, email can't be blank, and is invalid. Well, how did it know to show these things? Because my controller told him to register the errors from here. So now you can post the errors. I feel like I'm telling a lot of disadvantages, but this is another one of those things where dot errors is another method that has been written already. So you kind of don't see what's happening under the hood. So let's see what happens if we actually put in good data. So let's say Mike. Let's say his last name is Mike. First and last name Mike. Gmail.com. Make a password for him. We submit it. So now, since the information was valid, it took me to this page, which is what the controller did. So I put in valid information into my index page, and now it's going to redirect to this page. So if we go to routes, we can find one that has users, it needs an ID, and show. So now it's users, needs an ID, and show. So now it's going to go to our users controller and do the show. So there's our users controller and show. That's how we're able to access the first name of the user. That's how we're able to say welcome Mike. Well, what if we wanted to show something else? I probably shouldn't have named his last name the same, but let's just try email so you guys can see it. So here's a view page. And the reason I can get to the email, mike@gmail.com, is because in our users page, users controller, we have gave it access on the show page. An email. Get back to first name, save it, we can render it. So it's back to Mike. So that's how the models, views, and controllers work together. So just to reiterate the point one more time, the models controls all the data and the validation of the data, and what can and can get passed through into the database. The views are what you see, and well, there's not much and, it's what you see. And the controller is what's going to control what kind of data can and can't get passed through. So if it's invalid, it's going to show an error message. If it's valid, it'll take you to and redirect you to the appropriate page. So just the advantages of MVC one last time is that it allows you to put out code where anyone that looks at it can kind of see it and see what's going on. They can see that the controller is going to give an error if it's invalid, so they know they can go back. Maybe it's something wrong with the controller, something wrong with the model. But in the end, MVC just makes it very easy much easier for everyone to contribute and for you to kind of work and debug, and it makes it much easier to scale. So that is the lecture about MVC. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time.